All right, we are live for a Friday edition of the People's Talk Show. Kind of forgot what day it was, but excited to be back. What a hell of a week. A lot of negative sentiment on the dollar and distractions thrown our way are increasing. Gold and silver is doing pretty good right now. But Mario, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, Mike, and you?
I'm doing pretty well, man. Doing pretty well end of the week, and we're right, in my opinion, at the beginning of everything that you and I both have been talking about for years, in reference to the shift away from the Western dominance into something new, and to hear about how they're trying to iron out the kinks and work things out towards their solution for, I guess, creating alternatives is becoming quite interesting, I must say. But yeah, so here we are, end of the week, lots of things unfolded, and so throughout the week, there's been more, developments between Saudi Arabia, China, Russia, Brazil. I mean, you name it, they're all out here making deals, signing memorandums, and really trying to ramp up the move away from the dollar. So we're in the midst of the de-dollarization process. So I guess let's just start off with, I want to just, as I mentioned beforehand, go through 4 or 5 headlines and just look at the overarching tone, and then we'll get into some of our thoughts and other developments and whatnot. And so, and of course, we can't not talk about precious metals in comparison to the other fiats. But all right, so here we have just a couple days ago, BRICS nations offer a new world order as an alternative to the West, and so that's from Frontline out of the Hindu. Next article here: the old world order for crude oil is disappearing. Next one we got from India Forbes: Petro Yuan or Petro BRICS, the need for better alternative currencies to break dollar dominance. And then we have key Asian bloc looking to dump dollar and euro. And so, Mario, like, how obvious is that tone as to way the world is viewing the dollar right now? Are you surprised?
No, and I think it's been building up for many years, and that's why I've been speaking about the kind of demise of the petrodollar since like 2016 to
Mhm,
2017 on my channel.
mhm,
And it doesn't mean that the dollar is going to disappear. It just means there's going to be less demand for dollars. And I know
right.
the dollar system, the financial system worldwide, the dollar is very important. But these countries, especially in what is now being called the global south, they want an alternative because, and even in Africa, they've been basically they haven't been treated on an equal footing.
Mhm,
And surprisingly, some people might say, "Oh, you're naive," but I truly believe that the Chinese, the Russians, the Brazilians, the Indians, they want everyone to have an equal say in this,
mhm.
and which is something you don't have under a dollar system.
Right. Right. I agree. And just to be clear, like as you mentioned, and so I've been talking about this. I mean, the whole idea of rethinking the dollar came about because I anticipated at some point the world would rethink the current structure. And of course, we're in the midst of that now. And so just to be clear, the USD is not going anywhere. All this stuff happening out east is not to remove or completely eliminate the dollar. It's not about replacing a dollar. It's about providing alternatives. And in time, things will unfold and take care of themselves, similar to the way of the British pound. When it was a reserve currency, event occurred throughout the 30, 40, 50, 60 years. The shift took place, and here we are now with the new reserve currency. So it's going to be a long, drawn out process, but it's going to be ugly along the way. And we're in the beginning phase of seeing how they're maneuvering to come up with alternatives. And so we're going to dive into that right now. So the next article I want to bring up happens to be from Sputnik, and it's as of today. And so, of course, the BRICS seem to be leading the way towards this alternative push. But it says BRICS working on a new form of currency, State Duma deputy chairman. And so, what that currency looks like, it's yet to be determined. But it just makes it clear that it says here the transition to settlements in national currencies is the first step. The next one is providing circulation of digital or any other form of fundamentally new currency in the nearest future. And so I kind of hint at that digital new currency is probably going to be CBDC related or something of that nature, but we'll see. He says, I think that the BRICS Leaders Summit, the readiness to realize the project will be announced. Such works are underway. And so I'm not sure if that's this coming up in August or the next one after that, or but whatever. But clearly they're working on it, or at least they're telling us they're working on things. And it's my suspicion that they're a lot further along than what we'll know until it's actually time, because they're probably testing things right now or maneuvering things on a beta side rather than ready, having it ready for the public. But what are you thinking with this statement here? Do you think is this summit, next summit, or what are you thinking?
Well, I think they're not really thinking right now of a BRICS currency. They're thinking more of dealing with each other in their own fiat currencies,
Right.
and that will eventually probably create a problem. It's not going to be smooth, and I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. What it will do though is shift a lot of demand away from the dollar, but eventually I think the monetary asset that they're going to have to back this system will have to be gold, because of trade imbalances. Some countries are going to be, let's say Saudi Arabia is going to be stuck with the yuan that it can't get rid of, and another country that wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia might not want the yuan, but
Right.
everyone takes gold. So I think
Hmm.
gold will be very important eventually. But there was an interview by Pepe Escobar of the Cradle. He
Hmm.
interviewed Russian economist that is involved in all of this and the digital gold currency, and he said that, and this was March 13th, the interview, and he said they needed the uh, the joining of China. China had to be behind this. And a week later, of course, we saw Xi going to Moscow, and then when he left, he had that chat with Putin, saying we're making the biggest decision in the last 100 years. So I think that China's going to play ball with this new currency. And like that guy there, Glaziev, said, it's not going to be smooth sailing. And yes, probably the best place to be will be gold and silver, whether you are in the West holding dollars or pounds, or even if you're in the BRICS countries, you might want to have gold and silver as well, because it's not going to be smooth sailing. I'm not saying it's going to be a perfect system, but they want to move more into a financial trade system that's based on real goods. Yes, there will be a currency, which I think will be mostly gold backed, away from what we have now, which is a complete, like a Tower of Babel financialized system where central banks just create hundreds of billions a week or overnight.
Yeah.
I think the rest of the world, they've woken up to the fact that these people just print all these reserves and buy things from us, valuable things. We want that to stop.
Right. Good point there. Now, just to hint back on more of the developments. So you sent me this, so I just scanned through it. But this Sergey Glaziev guy, talking about the road to financial multipolarity will be long and rocky. And so with this here, a lot of it's centered on the countries in the EU, the European Union area, the EC, and things of that nature. And so you got Russia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Armenia, and all those nations working towards their. Say
It's not
again.
Europe. It's not European Union. It's Eurasian Union, I think. Yeah, it's
Good
most of
point.
the
Good point.
old Soviet countries, and he notes as well that they need China to be on board, and he
Mhm.
says that unless there's consensus, maybe from Russia and China, you can't. He said we can't force these countries to do this, but I
Right.
think it will happen because the BRICS countries like Brazil, and we've seen other countries wanting to join the BRICS, and we even seen I think Saudi Arabia now wants to join the Shanghai Cooperation
Mhm.
Organization. Iran is part of that. So even old enemies are joining together because maybe they've realized that being divided plays right into the empire's hands. It's like maybe at our level as well, maybe
Yeah.
being divided as individuals plays right into the hands of the people in charge. And that's what they want. And I think I could be wrong, because some people say, oh, are the BRICS countries, are they part of the BIS? Well, I think a lot of them deal with the BIS,
Mhm.
but Russian central bank, for example, they've been suspended since March last year. So who's to say they might not leave the BIS? There's a
Right.
bank around since 2014. It's called the New Development Bank. It's like a
Hmm.
BRICS nation bank, a little bit like the World Bank. So they could
Yeah.
gravitate towards that kind of institution instead of the BIS.
Right. And so that's a good point. So the BRICS have already set up a parallel system that mimics the old, World Bank G7 type of structure, and they have their own rules for that game there, and they're doing both at the same time while developing one, and they're extending invitations to the rest of the world. If you want equality, if you want a chance to let your voice be heard and not have a single currency, weaponized over you and enslaving you, then perhaps consider joining the BRICS. And so I actually saw a tweet last night, and I was talking about this on a little rant about the South African foreign minister talked about applications were submitted for consideration for the additional countries. And on that list was the ones we know about: UAE, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Argentina, and one or two others. But then Mexico was on that list. And so I tried to scramble to find the actual source from that. But it was shared around enough to where I'm like, well, if you just throw in Mexico, it wouldn't surprise me just because all those other ones are valid. And so I'm thinking like right now, it's the mad dash to join this new union, which is creating a whole multipolar world that China and Russia seems to be spearheading. And so one last little key I want to mention that I was thumbing through. There's this article here in reference to what was being said, and I would just quote what he said. It says, "I had initially proposed some talking points revolving around discussions between the EAEU and China on designing a new gold commodities-backed currency bypassing the dollar, and how it will be realistically possible to have an EAEU, Shanghai Cooperation, SEO, and BRICS Plus to adopt the same currency design." And
Yeah.
so it's good to say if he's talking about this is not new whatsoever. But the fact that it's being talked about mainstream is like, okay, I would assume they're a lot further along than what we will know until something is actually presented to the world. And will that be like that ultimate shock moment? Like if a
Wow.
second opportunity comes on the scene like that, and then they say next week we're open to receive payments or trade or whatever using this, you get a discount if you know how it usually goes to incentivize people. Would that be like a immediate shock to the markets or what?
Yeah, and I mean, they're still in denial. I think Fox and CNN have twigged onto all this development finally.
Yeah.
uh, but and I think though, even people in the alternatives, some people still poo-poo this. They think that the dollar will always be, essential.
Hmm.
And it will be essential for Americans and people that do business with the United States. China will still use dollars if they
Hmm.
buy anything from the U.S. But what will happen is that countries won't have to hold dollar reserves to buy
Hmm.
their oil, and that's really important because oil is the lifeblood of the economy. Because without oil, you don't have any energy. I know these crazy globalists want to move into these renewables, and but I think petroleum and oil products are going to be around for many decades to come. So can you imagine not having to hold as many dollars? People will
Right.
probably hold more gold, and that's why I think last year was the most since the Bretton Woods was created that central banks bought gold. The most gold that was bought was last year. And even in 2021, Brazil almost doubled its gold reserves. So I think people will rather, these countries are going to accumulate more and more gold. Yes, they're going to start out uh, using each other's currencies, and they're already doing that.
Hmm.
And even bartering. For example, I've seen that Sri Lanka and Iran have done deals where I think it's Sri Lanka or it could be Burma. Sorry, Burma. Burma
Hmm.
sends tea to Iran and Iran sends oil to Burma. So this is already happening.
Yeah. And I think just proof that it's already happening is just look at how close Saudi Arabia and China has become, having signed all these deals over the last several months. And as of recent, talking about utilizing the yuan for oil refinery developments on top of all the oil settlement as well in the yuan. And so like there is an alternative right now. When you have Saudi Arabia, the key country that is the head of the OPEC nations, it's like, okay, it's not too much longer that all the other nations will probably follow suit, and to where China signs a deal with OPEC in and of itself for yuan settlement as an alternative, not a replacement, just an alternative. And there you have two mediums that you can use. And the question is, like, you know, which one would you be incentivized to use more of in the beginning of this shift towards the east? And of course, that'll be the yuan or whatever else they come up with. So, yeah, interesting times, man. What do you got?
The
Thoughts on
other,
that one?
yeah, I just wanted to touch upon though something different because, like, I've heard Jim Rickards say, "Oh, the dollar is still going to be king because we have a really deep government debt market, treasury market. The whole world deals in it. But the only reason the world deals in U.S. Treasury is because the U.S. has been running huge trade deficits for ever since the '60s, and the only way to finance those deficits is to sell paper to the rest of the world. So
Yeah.
I would say a world that's more based on reality, on real goods. Uh, we're not going to need a huge government bond market. Maybe China might have one, but look at Russia. They don't even have 20% debt to GDP, national debt. So I just wanted to say that, to have a system going, a trade world system going parallel to the dollar, doesn't mean to say just because you don't have a liquid, deep treasury market for other countries that it won't work. And I would argue that the U.S. Treasury market has been highly illiquid for many years. They're having problems with liquidity because the supply is so huge. And apart from the central banks, there's not too many buyers of treasuries.
Right. I think as we get further into this banking contagion and all the scrambling behind the scenes with central banks to try to basically pour, as I say, pour more gasoline on a burning fire with the currencies, we're going to have a sovereign debt issue, and it's going to be exposed, and governments will be exposed as well, and no one's going to want to hold anybody's liabilities. And that's why I think the major part of the shift happens to be out of a debt-based structure into a commodity-based structure, because that's all about reestablishing trust. Like, you bring something to the table, then we can have some fair negotiations, because it won't be lopsided. You put something up, we put something up, we got business. So that's where we're heading.
I'll give you an example. I mean, I remember many years in Switzerland, uh, like there were little shops where, like the bakery, you could go there and buy loads of stuff, and you pay at the end of the month. So the guy just wrote down what you owed, and everyone paid. It was a small place. But can you imagine if you kept trying to tell the guy, "Oh, can you just roll over that? Keep rolling over that." And that's what the United States, unfortunately, has been doing for 50 years after, since Nixon closed the gold window temporarily.
Yeah,
um,
temporarily.
they, they've been buying real things with paper. And I think the rest of the world has woken up to it. Maybe
Yeah,
not the West, because maybe not the UK, because the UK just rides along, like a mini
on the
me.
same system.
It's like a little barnacle on the back of a whale.
Yeah. Now, speaking of, people catching on, of course, the Eastern Front happens to be the primary ones holding the biggest bag of liabilities. And there's a interesting trajectory of what has been, taking place. So this is apparently China has, the lowest amount of holdings since 2010. And of course, that ramp up was probably due to, helping finance the world after the financial crisis. But this trajectory here, it's I don't see this going back up anytime soon. Or is there something that could take place where China would want to then get back into the Ponzi scheme of holding debt for nothing? Or what are you thinking?
Well, I guess this chart would have descended a lot quicker in the last year and a half if the Fed hadn't raised rate as much as it has.
Mm-hmm.
So unless the Fed's prepared to go into double digits, I don't see that going back up anytime soon. I'm sure, China might still hold a few hundred billion eventually, but they'll be holding a lot more gold and maybe some in the beginning. Now they'll be holding some rubles, some UAE currency, or some rupees, some reais. I mean, we saw that China and Brazil announced this week that they're going to be dealing in their own currencies, which I think is quite significant
Yeah.
because Brazil is like it's a fairly big country, but even small countries, it doesn't matter because I saw Kenya. You know, all these little countries. It's like you add them all up, and it makes a difference, and people don't realize that.
Yeah, good point there. Let me see here. So keep it moving. Let's talk about this golden ruble. I didn't get a chance to read that, but you sent me an article. Let me bring this up here. What was some of this? Is looks like from January, but what was? I mean, I'm so it speaks for
I
itself. But you mentioned
I,
ruble.
I don't think that's too different than the one I showed you about that Glazayev. So we
Yeah,
don't have to really go through this
bad.
really.
No problem. So let's get into some of the events happening as far as the distractions. So here we Trump indictment thrust a divided nation into a new chapter of chaos. How timely could this be? And so, like when the banks started to have their issues, that's when the initial announcement of, "Oh, Trump is going to be indicted," and then of course they said Monday, then Tuesday. Okay, here we are now, a week into it, nothing's happening, and even him and his team not necessarily going along with it because I'm assuming he has to take it serious because it's coming from the DA in New York. But it's like, okay, I guess I saw the most recent tweet saying he's going to turn himself in on Tuesday, and so it's like, okay, is this literally designed to stir up his fan base, which happens to be a good portion of our country now that Biden has really much exposed himself to being just a Eastern puppet. But anyway, so this literally will just do the trick to distract people enough, or will they still be concerned with the trust of their funds and banks?
Well, I think it will distract a lot of people, but
Yeah,
not you and me, and hopefully a lot of the viewers here.
yeah. So I just it's gonna be interesting to see how this plays out, just because I think once again it's a very minor. I wouldn't say it's not a okay. I say a minor distraction in comparison to the things that could come if the banking situation continues to spread. So of course, Charles Schwab is having some issues on this side. Everybody's underwater and taking losses. And so my question is like, how does this play into the spring with these losses? Like, does it get to the point where more G-SIBs are threatened and literally they have to create some more tools or what? Because the only thing they do is continue to just paper over things. But when will that not work, in your opinion?
Well, if you remember back in '08, I think it was in March that Bear Stearns would have collapsed if JP Morgan hadn't taken over it. And and then it took about 6 months for Lehman to collapse and the whole system to implode. So yeah, I think right now the central banks are trying to paper over it. We saw the Fed's balance sheet has started going back up, and yeah, and they must be doing a lot of stuff in the background, behind the scenes we don't know about. The Fed started these new daily swap transactions, which basically mean the Bank of England can create as many pounds out of thin air, exchange them for dollars out of thin air, so that
Mm-hmm.
they can take the dollars and buy the pound to keep the pound strong, and vice versa. So they're already like, and this is all off balance sheet. So who knows? It could happen in the spring. Well, we are in the spring, but everything could unravel, or they might be able to keep it going until the fall, like
Mm-hmm.
September, October time. I mean, if you look back before March, the huge crisis that we had another one of these fires that they were able to put out was here in the UK. The gilt market collapse and the
Mm-hmm.
defined benefit private pension system almost evaporated. So they saved that, and now we've had another fire, which is SVB and the other banks. Will there be another fire right away? Will there be just fires all over? Who knows? It's difficult to
Mm-hmm.
say. But
Yeah.
again, that's why you need to keep stacking, in my opinion. You want to be out of this system as much as possible. I'm not saying you have to get out completely, but unless you believe everything's fine and you trust the central banks and governments to be doing the right thing.
Right. And one of the key takeaways that I got is just give it time. Like literally, within time, you mentioned like 6 months after. And so it takes time. Of course, no doubt they're scrambling on the back end trying to, plug holes in this monetary Ponzi scheme of piping system that's literally, I'm sure it's bursting all throughout the damn world because everybody who hold treasuries over the last, year or two plus is taking losses. So it's like, okay, who do you pick and choose to bail out quietly through these, swaps and things, these backdoor deals? And so we got the pension funds, they're taking losses. So it's like, okay, there's no stopping it. Now it's more so how can they contain it as best they can before another fire becomes obvious to the public. But along the way, as you mentioned, precious metals, we got to just jump on that because so here we are now. Let me bring on the screen here. We are at 24.11, $24.11 for silver, 1979 for gold, both in the green amongst all the currency issues as well as banking issues. Gold and silver has remained constant. They're monetary constants. And
Yeah,
so, yeah, that's the good news of the day, people.
I just want to share something here. I told
Yeah,
you I was going to share. Let me get it here. So this is the. Can you see it? Yeah,
yeah, I got it.
this is the quarterly chart of gold going back to like uh, 2003, and if you look at August 2011, that quarter, gold closed at 19. Where is it? Uh, 18. Actually, 18. It's this one here. Sorry. Uh, July 2020, gold closed at 1974.68. So
Mm-hmm.
right now we're near just above there. So if we close above 1975, this is the end of the quarter today. It's going to be the highest quarterly close ever for gold. So I think that's fairly significant. And silver as well. I had a pretty interesting trend line coming in around 24, all the way from the top in 2020. So I think it's looking better. I think people need to be patient and keep stacking if you can.
Yeah, let me go back to my main window here. I got to maneuver some things around my side here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So oh, $24, that's very promising. I mean, it's small in nature, but when you look at the fact that this is activity that's being priced in the USD, there's no telling what's happening in the euro and the British pound and all those other currencies amongst this global contagion that's underway. So, all right, what else we got here? Let me get to some more subjects if I can get my windows together. Let me minimize and close some things. What else we got here? It looks like the inflation talk. Eurozone inflation falls sharply. It's up sharply to 6.9% as energy costs recede. So, uh, yeah, falling sharply, huh?
It's still rising by 6.9%, right? And
Yes.
I mean, what they've done in Europe and also in the US with selling the strategic reserves, that's brought down energy prices. So yeah, it's still rising at 6.9. But I've always said to my viewers that you need to really know the true definition of inflation, because that's how they fool people, because
Mhm.
inflation is not the CPI. Inflation is the creation of currency and credit out of thin air, which leads to higher prices. So um, I don't think it's over by any stretch of the imagination, especially now with the BRICS countries and the rest of the world outside the US and Europe wanting to
Mhm.
diversify away from not just the dollar, but the euro, the British pound. There's going to be a lot less demand from the rest of the world, and less demand means higher government bond yields, because a lot of these countries, when they accumulate hundreds of billions in reserves, what do they do? Well, they'll buy the government bonds from those countries. Now they're buying gold to keep
Mhm.
gold as a reserve.
Yeah, and so think, I mean, so this is just heading into spring. All these issues that we're talking about here, and the underlier to that is the debt issue, the budget deal that is yet to be ironed out. And so, once again, our government's going to need, I think the whole Janet Yellen putting forth the budget proposal was 4.7 trillion or
Yeah.
something like that. It's like, okay, who's gonna be buying that? Who's in the market to take on more sovereign debt after
Oh,
all these currencies?
we haven't
So
even spoken about the other, gorilla in the China shop, which is the debt ceiling.
yeah. So yeah. So like it's interesting. It's being set up to be a hell of a summer to say the least, because something's going to give. The U.S. will not be able to plug all these holes and keep confidence. And I got a pit bull that decided to come give me some
Oh,
love. Let me see. Get her on the screen here. Here, look at her. Right, look. No, okay. She's not.
I
Yeah,
have
she's not
Rudy's not here right now, but yeah.
cooperating. She's that's my son's dog. But anyway, gotta get distracted there. All right, let's get to some questions, man. We're about 30 minutes in. Let's get to some questions and see what else is happening out here. I see a lot of talks about BRICS and countries joining. Let me bring some stuff on screen. If you see any, as always, Mario, highlight some stuff and I'll.
Yeah, I'm having a look here.
Ah,
The, low
let
blood.
me.
I think Rolf Steiner says, "Could you comment on something, please?" I don't know what he means, but
Let me see here. Let me. I gotta. Where am I at? Feel free.
I
Yeah, let
haven't
me go
seen
right
any
there.
questions so far. I'm just looking
Yeah.
at.
So for those who are, if you got questions or anything that you want to share, latest developments or whatever, things worth keeping an eye on to bring to the audience, definitely let us know in the comment section, and we'll try to get it on the screen and let
Brady
people know
Gray
about
says,
it.
Brady says Rudy would be a snack. I think your dog is that bad, is he?
No, she's a lover. She's a lover.
I know.
But yeah, she's never been around a real small dog, so she hates squirrels. So she made mistake for a squirrel. Um,
Carlos Garcia thinks the mining companies will get expropriated. Expropriated. Uh, I'm not too sure about that because it's a double-edged sword. You
mhm.
expropriate the mining companies, and governments never run businesses well. And then uh, instead of getting gold and silver and other minerals from mining companies, you'll get nothing. So I think there's a fine balance, really.
Yeah. So low blood pressure says breaking news: Texas to join the BRICS.
It's possible. Who knows?
Oh my goodness, that is funny.
Texas could join Mexico again. It was part of Mexico.
Oh man. So and that's where like okay, so we're gonna hear more about countries deciding to submit an application to join. Okay, and so once all the countries we know about join, then we're gonna have the countries we haven't talked much about, like a lot of Central American area, like what's his name, Honduras, not but Nicaragua. Nicaragua definitely, if not already, because they're buddy buddy with China and Russia, so they're going to be on the list. And so a lot of the countries that use the U.S. dollar as its currency might end up shading towards the
Yeah,
east as well. Therefore, they got to make some decisions because
yeah.
if their currency is dollar, then
I want to
yeah.
say something here because I think there's going to be a lot of jingoism going on, and I'm not
Mhm.
defending China or Russia or Brazil or anything. Uh, yeah, not just in the U.S. but here in Europe, with this challenge to the dollar and the Western system, they're going to say, "Oh, China is authoritarian." And, I think they're going to heed, turn up the volume on that just to try to make people not look at that. But the reason why we talk about it is because we want people here in the West to be prepared for
Mhm.
what's coming. You just have to go back to the UK back in the 50s and 60s. It wasn't a good time. It was, yeah, the economy didn't do well after the UK lost its reserve currency status. But there will be opportunities. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah. Here's something here from Wana Song. It says, "What do you think the subject of the conversation will be when Ursula and Macron go to China this next week?" That's a great. I would love to be a fly on the wall in that conversation because they can't stop anything happening with the developments out east. So it's going to be more so how can they not be ran over or how can they also comply and work along with, as they themselves might end up shifting from the Western dominant system, even though they're part of it, into the new system. So
Yeah, I think, I mean, I wasn't even aware they were going there, but be as it may, what I think they might be talking about is maybe trying to reassure the Chinese that it's going to be business as usual between the EU and China, trade-wise and economically, because maybe China is not too sure right now because the US is really ratcheting up the sanctions talk, the talk about Taiwan right now, and
yeah,
China might not be too happy. They want to know what the EU is thinking, so that's probably what they might talk about.
yeah.
Maybe the president of China is going to ask Macron to respect human rights, just like just like they do. They ask the Chinese, right?
Yeah. It's interesting that, I haven't followed it this week because of all the BRICS and the other developments, but, with the whole pension situation in France and the protests, and I've seen video footages, and I've actually seen someone in like the little Times Square area, wherever they were meeting at a large gathering, was that they had their camera pointing to us, like, the thousands of people, and then they showed another phone where it said live from that same square. It was just your casual people walking. So they had a fake or time lapse type photo to show there wasn't nobody in that area, in real time, but there was just flooded. So think about what's not being, publicized in reference to what's happening around the world. So it's like, yeah, very interesting. But next week will be very timely.
Rope
What else? Any other questions?
Steiner has a question. How can the French Navy attack China? It's a long trip from France to China.
Yeah, I don't think their military capabilities or naval capabilities really all that. Even though I remember last couple years ago, I think France was set to build some warships for Russia, and then the U.S. got involved, and they had to sever those ties or cancel the contracts or something. So yeah, before the West got involved, things were looking very prominent. Buddy M50 says on March 28, Asian countries discuss how to settle trade in local currency instead of dollar. 2 days later, Asian members Singapore announces another increase in its gold.
Oh, that's interesting. Singapore, they've been buying a lot of gold this year. I will check up on that actually. And I saw a clip on TikTok or somewhere
Mhm.
of this Western journalist. He sounded maybe Dutch or German, and he asked a question to this Singaporean diplomat about China, and it was really interesting because this reporter said, "Oh, what about the repression in China?" And the guy really wiped the floor with that reporter, and so they.
Not surprising. Here's something from just earlier this month. Singapore Central Bank quietly
Yeah,
boosts its gold reserves by 30%,
yeah,
a
I think
massive 44.6
covered that.
tons.
I covered that in one of my videos earlier this month, but I don't know if they've increased it even more or if this that viewer is talking about that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd imagine they probably got some more. So a part of like divesting out of the dollars, like you got to do something with them, and
Well,
so you
gold.
can either send them back here, buy property, buy land, whatever, have it seized by the government, or you
Well,
just
but
buy gold, which is
the thing is,
international sovereign currency. Huh?
well, yeah, want something liquid, of course. You don't want to buy property. And the
Right.
thing is, you just have to go back to a regression theory analysis. Why was the dollar the reserve currency in 1944? Well, because it had a lot of gold. So
Hmm.
it,
Point.
some people don't look at history and they just look at gold and think it's a barbarous relic, but it's the most important monetary asset alongside with silver. Silver is more of the masses money, I would say. It's just as good though, and yeah, still stacking that as well.
Yeah. What else we here? I see here. I see more of a personal question here, but it says, "Question: What percent of your net worth is in metals compared to paper investments?"
150%. No, I'm joking. Yeah. Well, it's all personal. It depends on, but I think you should have some,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. And so I like how, for example, like some of the talking heads, you got some billionaires. I think I can't. Some billionaires that be interviewed on mainstream channels. They're talking about having a minimum of your portfolio, at least 5% or 10% gold. It's very small because they have stocks, equities, foreign this for whatever real estate. And so depending on where you're at and what you're looking to do with that now and in the future, determine what you have. But it's interesting how the mainstream pundits always talk about 5-10% of your net worth in metals. I'm like, okay, but then some say a little bit in crypto, a little bit Bitcoin. I'm like, okay, well, whatever floats your boat.
I think in the world where the monetary system is stable, then yeah, have 5 or 10%.
Mm-hmm.
But where we are right now, I'd want to have uh, the opposite. I'd want to
Mm-hmm.
have a lot more gold and silver.
Yeah.
Eventually, hopefully, we'll be able to get assets that are still overpriced relative to gold and silver right now. Once that shifts,
Here's a good question here. It says, what happens when the most of the U.S. currency abroad comes back home to the USA? And for me, what I'm thinking, like when I saw that, the first thought was, as I mentioned earlier, about it's going to be a potentially slow, gradual process of this alternative systems being brought online, to where you'll have a moment where there'll be two competing networks, currencies, whatever, or more. And then throughout time, the dollar system will fade away. And therefore, along with that time frame, that's when all the reserves and dollars will be spent and liquefied and brought back here. And so that could be a much longer period of time, I think, unless a major event occurs to where it's a scramble to unload your dollars. But
I think
my anticipation is being longer. Say again?
I think it's already happening.
Yeah, yeah, and
That's why the bond markets are going down and
yeah,
yields are going up. You saw the Chinese chart; they're selling their
yeah.
dollars. So his question, I think when the dollars come home, it means they don't want to finance the U.S. anymore. So they're going to sell a lot of debt instruments. You're going to have higher rates, inflation, and
Mhm.
the flood of dollars that will come to the U.S. will make. Yeah, it's just like issuing more shares. It's
Mhm.
going to dilute the dollar at home because foreigners are not going to be keeping it in the drawer. The bonds. It's not in the drawer these days, but
Right.
in the system, they want to get rid of it. They're going to have to sell the dollars to do that.
Right, and that's where, like, I always wonder, because of course you worked in the markets directly. Like, how do you actually know who owns the bonds? What do you like? Because so much stuff is either rehypothecated or just lent out. I mean, just so many things. Like, so how do you actually know who owns what in a system that's all digital already? Like, how people how they're with the repo markets, they're giving
Yeah,
treasuries to the Fed overnight, whatever. They're
yeah.
not
There's
moving paper.
I mean the DTCC. I mean
Is
they
that
know.
the only source?
Ah,
And so is that the only source? Because they keep record and
yeah.
keep track of everything.
Yeah, there are clearing systems as well. Like in Europe, it's called Euroclear, I think.
Mhm.
They do keep track of who owns what, of course. And but not if you hold a lot of dollars. I think in a lot of countries, people hold cash dollars outside the system. That's difficult to quantify.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay.
A question from Normal Norm, where it's a comment which is quite interesting.
Right here, the one about five of my classmates have called me for buying gold, silver recently here in the U.S. Everyone is getting scared. I mean, it's definitely, this is getting people attention. The banking situation is waking up a few people, especially people who have large amounts above that 250,000. Like, it's a scramble right now. Like, am I covered or what?
Yeah, even if you have less than 250,000, what I think is going to happen is because the central banks are and the treasuries are covering all the deposits. They bailed out the SVB billionaires or
Mhm.
even multimillionaires. So yeah, I'm not surprised people are getting worried about it. And yeah, we've been warning about this for years. And unfortunately, there will be a lot of people who won't do it because they're going to wait for gold to get back to $1,500, and
I think that's Harry. That's Harry Dent's price. Harry Dent says going back down to 1,100. Then that's when that's
well,
must be a great buying time.
he had 700 a few years ago. He kept saying it was 700.
I ain't seen that yet.
Hmm.
Haven't seen that at all. What else you got here? Where's the dictate? No, it was a question. Will riots start in the U.S. this summer? Will food stamps, Medicare, and Section 8 be turned off this summer too? X. Your guess is good as mine, man. But all those things you mentioned, they come from the government. So if the government giveth, the government can take it away. So, any moment they want to take it away, it's up to them, and it will definitely cause chaos and pandemonium. So, yeah, it's possible. Or, like as always, we're still anticipating some real false flags or cyber attacks, internet down, grid down, or something crazy to be thrown our way if things get really out of control. So, what else we got here? Anything else? U.S. empire loves stealing gold from other countries. Yeah, they're not going to steal gold from China or Russia. That's for sure. They ain't going to invade Russia or invade China to go take their gold. That'll be that'll be the end of this planet. They're going to nuke every damn body. I don't see any more questions, Mark. You getting ready to dial it back then. What else is coming up? Anything? We got the new month tomorrow, April 1st, April Fool's Day.
Well,
it's going to be
it's the
April 1st. Yep.
Well, it's the beginning of the year, isn't it? Because if you apparently they used to have 13 months of 28 days. So if you look at October, 8, so eighth month, November. So if you go from October, 5 months, if you go to April, that's the beginning of the year. So.
And so I've heard, I haven't, so a lot of the videos that show like a lot of history has been hidden from us, and how within the last 100 plus years they turn history upside down and remove stuff. And so yeah, and I would love to be able to ask some serious questions about that and get an answer with truth. But then again, it may not be in this life.
Here in the UK, April marks the beginning of the financial year. That's when you start counting your taxes to pay next January. Is from April 2023 to April 24th. That's the tax year.
Yeah, so ours is April 15th, so it's like, same thing, the same thing here. Well, so we'll have to just buckle down and, of course, enjoy life in the meantime, but, keep your eyes on the metals and everything of that nature, because all types of noise is going to be thrown our way. The Trump situation might escalate to something next week, who knows? But in the meantime, the Eastern Bloc is still pressing forward, working towards their objective of de-dollarizing the world and giving the world alternatives. So create alternatives for yourself. Just don't be stuck on one currency, whatever country you're in, because as we're witnessing, it's all debt backed, and we're in transition to an asset backed world. So we got to figure out how to participate.
Don't get stuck on the us against them thing, China versus US, UK versus Russia. Just think of what's best for you and your family. And there you go.
You must have to go outside. All right. Well, as always, Mario, it's great to connect with you, my friend. We'll have a great weekend. And everybody, appreciate you for joining us. MyNico64, hit the thumbs up button, show some love for the channel, and we will see you guys next week, because as always, there's going to be something to talk about. So be blessed, be safe, stay prayed up. Peace.